Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Capital Improvement Committee. Today is June 23rd, 2021, and we're meeting in the Gala Room live at 6 p.m. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us. We have before us requests from two departments. One is the DPW department, and the other one is from the school department on several items that they'd like to seek approval for use in their departments prior to the end of the fiscal year. Due to some funding that they may or may not have available to them, and we're going to have a conversation about that. And first on that list is some items that are coming from the DPW department. So I'll ask Chris to speak to both of his items.
Sure. So the first is the DPW Feasibility Study. This is something that has been on the capital list for 2 or 3 years. The garage itself is close to 70 years old and has had seen very little work done to it, and is the same size as it was when the DPW had a much smaller staff, at that time 70 years ago. So we're looking for $50,000 to bring an engineering firm in who has public works experience designing these facilities, doing these studies. They'll look at the number of staff we have, the mechanics that we have, the function that we use the space for, as well as how many staff members we have, things like OSHA compliance, safety standards, make sure that we're in compliance with all those things. So a few years ago when we first started, the quote was roughly $35,000. Things have escalated, so we're closer to the $45,000 to $50,000 mark now. So I have that on here as an item that's been an ongoing ask and has fallen down the list. One of the things I would like to point out, I've said it before on other infrastructure work, whether it's streets and sidewalks and other things, that I think we really need to take care of the facilities that we have in town before we add new infrastructure. So Mark Craig did a fantastic job last night presenting the senior center, intergenerational center that's being looked at. But I think we do need to take care of the infrastructure we have before we move forward with anything new.
Okay. And the item is $50,000. Is there any? And why don't you describe both items, and then we'll talk about the financing of that.
Sure. The second item we have are the two-way radios that the DPW staff uses. The radios we currently have are no longer being manufactured. We cannot find them, so we're not able to add to or replace any of the radios that we have. These are things that we use throughout the year, in particular during storms, whether it's snow or hurricanes, wind, rain. When having your cell phone in your hand is not safe. You're soaking wet or you're covered in snow. Also, you're driving a truck when you're supposed to be hands-free. So the two-way radio is exempt from that hands-free law, and it really is something that we need to upgrade. So working with Rob Verdone and Ken Fitzgerald for SEMREC and Foxborough Police Department, we have looked at using one of the bandwidths that one of the channels that already exists that is unused through SEMREC and Foxborough Police Department, looking at the antenna, repeater, other infrastructure work that would need to be done up at SEMREC. Adding an antenna to the SEMREC tower is approximately $50,000, and then having $25,000 to purchase new radios. Also utilizing 20 plus radios from the school department, from the buses that are no longer in use. We can reuse those within our own DPW trucks. So that'll let us cover all of the highway trucks, tree and park, equipment maintenance, as well as adding them to the water department, because currently the water department has no radios in their system. So if cell service ever were to go down, we're back in the dark ages. So we're looking at $80,000 for a two-way radio system upgrade.
Okay. All right. Your financing proposal, have you identified funds for these purchases?
I have not. I am looking at our operating budget year-end savings. We're looking at approximately $150,000 in our salary and line items that is going to be unused. That's really the only funding source within the DPW budget that would be available. The other option would be, looking at some of the infrastructure money, the American Recovery Act that's coming forward, which I know is still up in the air as far as what that's going to be used for. But I think these would both be worthy, if not from the salary budget at end of year, that for that infrastructure money.
All right, so salary lines probably couldn't be used for this type of purchase, but any thoughts on the ARP money, Murray?
We're still awaiting guidance on. We're still awaiting guidance on that. Every day they keep releasing more. There's nothing specific yet on what other types of capital projects would apply.
Okay.
Right now, it's just mainly water, sewer, and broadband. And it says there's a possibility you could use it for other capital projects. They just haven't released the guidance on that yet.
Understood.
So I can't say yes for sure.
Fair enough. So it looks like there's money available within the budget, but not within the right line for him to do that. So I do think that I'll defer to my colleagues on the committee, but I think the case has been made many times over for the expenditures that he's asking. And I think the money will probably fall to free cash at the end of the year. So that would be an item for us to consider in the fall of this year, because I do think once that happens. Now, it also comes to mind, too, that we could consider this as a possible expenditure through the ARP money, provided that there's agreement amongst the various boards and committees that that's a proper expenditure for those, or for proper use of those funds. But I do think, and there's more to discuss about that, because I'm not sure how you appropriate that, if that requires further, like a town meeting approval or anything like that. I'm not sure about that, but hopefully that's not the case. But we need to know if in fact they're eligible for expenditure anyways. So that's rule number one before we can get to that point. So, and I'll defer to my colleagues on the committee. Is there any thoughts about the requests themselves?
I think, having seen what goes on with the department, a building that is as old as I am obviously has to, face an upgrade, and, it would help with, I'm sure, with the team that works down there to know that they're getting support from the community.
Right, I agree.
To better improve their working conditions and their operation. And the two-way radio system is an absolute no-brainer, that they can contact people in the trucks in case of, community emergencies, and be able to deploy them to assist whenever we do have issues in the community, whether it's blizzards or hurricanes.
Right.
So I think it's really essential that the rolling stock for the highway department has that capability.
Agreed.
I'm in favor of, both those studies.
Okay.
Just to make sure I understand it correctly, with what you have left over in salaries, if it's a transfer of line, and then you have that funding that could take care of this unless we find out through the guidance that it's a possibility to be able to fund this later on.
Yeah, the way it works on the town side of the budget is that if it was in the expense side, you'd be okay, but because it's in the salary line, we can't do that. Yeah, so it'll fall to free cash at the end, and so it'll be clean to use it that way, but we have to wait till that happens before we can do that. So otherwise, therefore, I think this would be something that we would probably carry over into the fall, maybe look to try and recommend it, get it done then. Unless, like I said, of course, if something comes up with the ARP money, in between, we might be able to do it sooner.
So wouldn't you, you have the authority as a CIP committee to basically accept or agree to these items subject to funding?
That's right.
you're not responsible for the funding side of it as.
No, and I was going to get to that point. So I do think that's a valid point, Bill, and I appreciate you saying that. So if the committee itself is supportive of these items, then we can take a vote to support them and then subject to funding. So I would ask for a motion to that effect.
I'll make that motion.
And George, you're going to say something?
Chris, I know the water and the sewer are part of the DPW. Is there anything under that?
Yeah, I mean, there is some expense funding left in water and sewer that could pick up, their fair portion of the radio system.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe you can cobble it together between all three places. That might be enough for one of them at least, so you don't have to wait until the fall.
So if there's I think we would have to figure out the funding mechanism after this discussion
Yeah.
tonight, but I would say, if in fact, so there's a motion on the floor to recommend these items for funding. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. So let's move right to the school items. And I assume I'm going to turn this over to Bill Yukna.
Yeah. So I've given you all a handout that I tried to give as good a description as I can of what we're looking at. I'm going to start it with where our funding source comes, so it just makes a little bit more sense to you why we're asking for this. As you know, on our budget, obviously, we have latitude between expenses and salary to move money, but we are underspending our sped tuitions, out-of-district tuitions, and transportation by over $600,000 due to the COVID and students not obviously going to these placements. We are underspending our salary lines significantly because, again, of COVID, where we couldn't run any of our extracurriculums, we couldn't do a lot of the athletics, we couldn't do tutoring, we couldn't do numerous things that are in the salary lines to the tune of almost $700,000. So the reality here is we're going to prepay some of our tuitions for next year because we have an issue there with a very large move-in that's going to cripple our budget if we don't. School committee approved that. That will use about $300,000. We're going to, and then we'd like to do some of these other items that we're proposing here. So from a funding point of view, right now I'm sitting, after the tuition prepayment, I'm sitting on almost $1 million that we aren't going to spend that will come back to the town. We talked about the chiller issue at the middle school previously, and so I tried to kind of give you a description here, but we have tried to Band-Aid this system since 2014 by replacing compressors. There's 2 large chillers at the Hearn School, which are 2001 vintage equipment. And the first one died with one of the compressors out of the 2 going in 2014. We replaced it for $38,000. The second compressor in the second unit died in 2016. We replaced that for $42,000. The compressors only come with a 1-year warranty, so unfortunately, you don't get a lot of life potential out of that if something goes wrong. And unfortunately, the 2014 one has already died. So that was a bad enough issue where we were running on one full chiller with half of the second chiller. The issue then happened is we just lost the second compressor on the second chiller. So we're down to 1 compressor running in each of these 2 chillers, which is barely enough to maintain temperature within that building. The building was designed to have these chillers running. It does not have a system that basically says you just open the windows and you're fine. So this is definitely a problem, and as you know, we use that building for our summer school programs.
Right.
So it's kind of critical that we have the ability to cool it. So right now, I'm showing you basically what we think is our worst case numbers, which we hope will come down once we go to the actual final bid on it. But to do an RFP, we need obviously to have an engineer design how the system is going to be replaced, 1 chiller, leaving the other chiller in place. That's about $35,000. The chiller itself, equipment-wise, is about $145,000, and piping, electrical materials, and rigging would be another $55,000. So we're looking at a total cost of about $235,000 to replace a single chiller at that building. However, It is, based on the newer technology, we would be looking at something that goes from having 2 compressors to having 6. So you have a lot more life potential out of them. From 4 stages, which just means how hard they have to work, to a 10-stage system, so they can be more variable, if you will, moving up and down, so the efficiency is tremendously higher. And we would rely on this new chiller as the supportive one, with the other one as the backup. We also think it's possible that the one compressor that's working in the chiller that we would replace, that's still good, we would pull and hopefully be able to replace the compressor that's bad. It may not buy us a long time, but for a few dollars, we think we can get that and have 2 chillers operational. So that's our first and really kind of our primary request, because we really see this as a major issue for the town financially if we don't kind of get this one resolved soon, especially if we lose the other compressor.
All right. Any questions from the committee? No, this is something you talked about actually during the March meeting.
Right.
As a possibility. So there's nothing new that's come before the committee in that respect.
No. And we already are in conversations with Mass Save and the utility companies to get their rebates in line. Obviously, anything we get in that rebate, we would turn back to the general fund. So, or just reduce the overall cost, depending on how they actually do the rebate. Sometimes they make the payment go directly to the vendor, and you can keep the cost down, and that therefore, whatever we didn't spend with the 235 would come back to the
Yeah,
town.
that's exactly right.
So.
All right, musical instruments?
This also has been on for the last 3 years. We have whittled away a little bit of things when we had a little bit of extra money, but because the items that I'm presenting tonight, which are on the backside of this, are much larger, a tuba at $9,500. We need a couple of them. The soprano sax, which is almost $6,000, barrel sax, which is almost $6,000, and then a tenor sax at almost $3,000. Again, the entire thing was a 3-year. What we presented was a 3-year program to try to get this older equipment upgraded for the music program. What we're asking for is the original request for this year was $67,509. We're asking if we could spend $33,390 on these much larger items and get them off the list, at least at this point, and try to chip away at some of the others as we have funding available.
All right, questions from the committee? Only question I had is, have you approached the Music Moves You group from the Bach Motors? Ernie Bach has a foundation that actually provides instruments. I know that I think Lowell High School was recently flooded, and he offered to replace a lot of the equipment that was destroyed. So through a grant. So you might want to think about that.
Oh,
There's a possibility.
we'll definitely reach out to them and see
Yeah.
if there's any option there.
Yeah. So I
As I
just heard
said-
that. I just happened to hear that the
Yeah.
other day. So
As I said, this is 67,000 times 3 that we're
Yeah.
looking for. So if anything we can get from anywhere, we'll
Understood.
be happy to accept it.
And keep in mind, he was instrumental in getting the Creature feature put back on
I know.
Saturday afternoon, so, I mean, he's got the dough to do it with, or
That's
whatever.
right. No, he definitely does. So, all right, Foxborough High School auditorium seating.
This, the auditorium seating is from 1972, so it's 48 years old. Much of the fabric and the cushions themselves are pretty worn and not in great shape. The mechanisms for the seating are actually pretty good. It's amazing. There's only a few that we would actually have to buy new springs and systems that way. But what we're presenting is basically, we've been working with Mass Core, which is part of the Mass Corrections. I think DPW uses them too. And their pricing is phenomenally better than
Yeah,
the
it
private
is.
sector. I did some quotes with a couple of the others, and their pricing was about a third less than going to private sector. Plus, because of them being state, you don't have to go out to bid and go through the process that way. So there's about 660 seats in the auditorium. The fabric side of the replacement with all new cushions, fireproof fabric and cushions systems is about $46,200. The removal, painting, sanding and painting of the metal backs and seats is another $23,100 for a total of $69,300. Obviously, the schools use this auditorium significantly,
Yeah.
but the town is their major, place to come for meetings and stuff like that. So, again, nearly 50-year-old seating that I think has served the town well, but we've done a lot of work in this auditorium, again, over the years as we've had money to do it. We're new lighting, new carpeting, redid the stage lighting, redid the stage, flooring and stuff. So we've been trying to chip away at it, but this is kind of a little bit bigger expenditure. So with the three of these together, we're basically looking at $337,691. I think this seating one is really, quite honestly, a good thing to get done for the town, again, as the only major auditorium that the district has as a availability.
So just a point that I want to raise, because I think it's important for the residents and whoever with Washington to hear this, is that these items are things that are clearly needed and need to be done, and it's within your existing budget now. If these were not approved, it would fall to free cash anyways, and we'd end up paying for them that way anyway. So it's not like we're taking money from something and we're reducing an account then somewhere else. We're actually reducing, and you're still going to turn back $500,000-$600,000.
Correct.
At the end of the day. So so that's for the benefit of anybody else who makes a request for so. So we're not like we're treating this differently in many ways. It's actually the ability to do it now because you can do that with the ability of your budget to do that on a state law basis.
I think it's also important for the taxpayers to understand that a lot of the reason that we have the amount of money we have is that we used as much of the CARES Act money and
Right.
grants that we could go after, the ESSER
agree.
grants and all those, to basically not only cover the costs that are COVID related, but in any area that we could use the money that legitimately allowed us to, that would leave money in our budget so that
Correct.
it would come back to the town.
Yep.
And we thought that was a more prudent thing in the end, that basically the town got the money back versus it having to be returned back to the state and not be used that way.
And to your credit and to the district's credit, that's not always the case. I mean, I've seen situations where a lot of money gets spent and nothing gets turned back to the town. And so I appreciate the due diligence, the management, the consideration of the taxpayers' dollars in that regard, that you did everything you could to try and minimize that impact and also turn back money at the end of the year. So appreciate that. So any questions from the committee on the items?
No, I think, we've heard the musical instruments have been on the list, for several years now, and they've been pushed down the line. If there's funding left over, I think that's a good way to start that replacement program. The auditorium seating, was not done when the high school was renovated. Maybe it wasn't ready yet, but it's certainly
No,
ready
actually,
now.
that's a good point, Chris. I should have said that. The reason the auditorium was not renovated at all during the high school thing was that the MSBA would not participate at all in auditoriums. They felt that was not a school function as much as we use it, which is kind of funny.
Which is every
But
school uses
that's the
them, for
reason
that
that
matter.
wasn't part of that program.
That's wild, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. All right, other questions? I think, Amy, you know this probably as good as anybody, so.
I do.
Ed? Any questions? No? Good. All right, so I'll take a motion to approve the items, the Ahern Middle School. Do we want to do it? We can do it as one one motion, I think? All through, I'll do it.
probably ought to do them as three
Separately, okay.
separates.
All right, so I need a motion to approve the Ahern Middle School chiller replacement.
I'll make that motion to approve the Ahern Middle School chiller replacement for $235,000.
We have a second.
Second on that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then a motion to approve the musical instruments for the Ahern Middle School music program as described.
I'll make a motion to approve the musical instruments for the Ahern and high school music programs in the amount of $33,391.
I have a second.
Second on that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And finally, the Foxborough High School auditorium seating. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to replace the Foxborough High School auditorium seating as described in the amount of $69,300.
All right, I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. All right, any further business before the Capital Improvement Committee at this time? All right, motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.